2 minutes behind. Could be worse.
It's, you know, so that's a win. In my experience in government,
I know.
2 minutes
welcome
behind
back.
is early.
Welcome back to Center of Economic Development. And we welcome back Monroe Weinberger, who is running, I believe you're running and directing.
They call me the executive chair of Westfield Homes. I'm chair of the board and the part-time executive.
Right, and very helpful in our developing our housing work last year, and so we welcome you back, and if you, there he is, give you the floor. Welcome, Monroe.
Thank you, Senator Clarkson, Chair Clarkson. It's it's exciting to be back with you. A lot's happened, I feel like, with housing in Vermont and Westfield Homes since the last time I testified here. I meant to check. I was rushing to be on time on the way in. It's still there. All right, great. I thought that was it, but I couldn't
No,
come back.
it was a great poster for our door. For those of you who aren't here in the building, we have the Let's Build Homes poster on our door.
And we appreciate that, and the coalition appreciates that. It's a coalition that's grown since we last talked. We now have almost 900 Vermonters are part of Let's Build Homes one way or another, and more than almost 270 Vermont organizations. And I think in the different organizations that are part of the coalition, you really see the breadth of this pro-homes coalition. We have everything from, small affordable housing committee members in rural towns to our largest employers and growing employers are part of the coalition. You see AARP and groups representing younger Vermonters like VPOP, Vermonters for People-Oriented Places. You have, I think what makes this different than some of the past housing initiatives in the state is just the breadth of the pro-homes interests that are involved, the hospitals, utilities, secondary education. It's a big and growing, continues to grow coalition. We have just released a 2026 platform after, and I want to just, it's a fairly lengthy platform, and great to see you guys have been able to print it out already ready. It's built on these 4 predictive pillars. We wrote this platform after spending the summer having 7 public meetings in every region of the state, after touching base with as many of the Vermont kind of housing stakeholders as we could. And we ultimately made the decision to release this platform that I think really touches on many different aspects of policy areas that we think action is possible in. They break down in these 4 pillars: provide predictability and speed time to market, unlocking capital, reducing construction costs, lowering costs to own and rent. And you can see there's considerably more detail in each of these pillars in our platform. And I don't think that great use of our time is to go through each of them in detail. I thought I would focus on where, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about any aspects of them. The areas where we see the greatest opportunity for impact this session, I was going to focus my remarks on.
I think that's a great focus. Because not every one of those areas the state can have impact on.
Yes, great.
And it can and can't.
Yes.
So I think you were very clear on where government can actually intervene and improve. It is helpful to focus us on what we actually can accomplish.
Great. And so my testimony today does sort of build off a testimony given in the House as well, where I appreciate, Chair Mahaly has been kind of focusing in on what's working, and I thought that was an interesting way to think of it.
Great way to start.
And this committee should be particularly proud of, I think, one of the things that from where I'm sitting seems like it is really on its way to working, which is CHIP. You guys passed, with your leadership and people in this committee's leadership, a very strong CHIP bill last year. I think the work that Betsy led during the summer, that I know, Senator, you were a big part of, was like a model of how public process should work, with a focus on urgency and getting things done, but taking a lot of input at the same time. We certainly felt like we had an opportunity to weigh in on that. Guidance got published on time, and as far as I know, the program is on track to open in the next few days here before the end of the month. There has been, I don't know if you guys have heard this, but they've been doing these 3 webinars leading up. Great webinars and incredible attendance.
Well attended.
Over 250 people in each of the first 2. I think the third one might have been a little bit smaller. And many of the people logging in, as I understand it, were representing local governments around the state, towns that in the past, have not had the tools to be active on generating housing. I think you have tapped into something very significant and important, and really almost like restoring what used to be a core element of local government, of working to build the grand list by building infrastructure. You've given municipalities an ability to do that again. I think there's going to be a huge response. I don't want to linger here. Yeah.
Thoughtful, predictable time frame, and speedy. I mean, we did all those things in a fairly short time, and we are now up and running, opening this one. Very exciting.
Couldn't agree more, and that's exactly what I was trying to express in saying. I thought it was a model of urgency and
at the moment.
Yeah. So I don't want to spend time on this, and hopefully you're never going to have to hear about this again. The chair and I have had one discussion there. We do have one concern about how this tool gets used for not just rental housing, but for sale housing, because of the 20-year requirement that goes with the prop. It's supposed to in some way go with the property after a developer makes a sale. How do we ensure that those homes remain primary homes for the compliance period? There's some questions about that are hopefully going to get worked out as the first of these agreements gets approved by Betsy. It's possible I'll have to come back here and talk to you about it again. I'm really hoping not, but I didn't want it to be a total surprise. All right, well, maybe not on this one, but hopefully we can be talking about other things. Moving forward, Act 181. Act 181 did a lot of things, and but there's what I've come to understand that I think is ultimately going to go down as the most important thing about Act 181, and that I think is on its way to working at least, although, maybe there may need to be more here, but we now have a way, we have the beginning at least of kind of mapped legal consensus about where we want housing growth to happen in the future. And if you think about it, since Act 250 was created, we've never really had that before. And that's been a problem. It's a problem that's held the state back. I think it's been one of the kind of core reasons why we have this housing shortage. We are far enough in now, almost 2 years into the implementation of Act 181, where you can see we're going to end up with a future land use map statewide that has a bunch of these tier 1 eligible areas. Probably about 100, I think, is the count that no one quite knows because it's an ongoing process, but about 100 of them. And that is a breakthrough.
I haven't actually thought about a number that will have 100 communities in tier 1.
And I may turn out to, I am doing my best from the input we've gotten from Regional Planning Commission chairs and whatnot. I think that's where we're headed. Another way to think of it is, it seems like we're headed towards around 2% of the state mapped in a tier 1 eligible area. I suspect over time we may, and actually one of the ideas I'm going to present to you actually is sort of speaks to this. I think we may need to expand that some over time, and intuitively 2% feels narrow to me, but at least we now are on our way to having 2%. And my main message to you today, where I think there's the greatest opportunity for near-term further progress meeting the housing production goals, that's the way I define that progress, is through pulling every lever we can to accelerate housing growth in these areas that we now have consensus, these housing growth areas. And I'm going to get to those in a moment. I want to just, before moving off this slide, say I do think, I want to be really clear that we think the Rural Caucus has raised some important points about Act 181 implementation, and it is that, they have raised concerns about how Tier 3 is being implemented. We have concerns. They persuaded us that those concerns could potentially negatively impact existing housing and small-scale housing growth in rural areas, and we support what they put in this legislation of slowing that down, bringing more people into the conversation, as well as clarifying, this is in their legislation, what it means for municipalities in tier 1A to be responsible for enforcement of existing Act 250 permits. That is an issue that is creating
That's an issue we're hearing.
Yeah.
Who's an impediment for them actually accepting their tier.
That's what I'm hearing too, if we're
Thomas
hearing.
has-
I share all your concerns on tier 3, and we need to get in rural caucus, and we need to advance that. But on your second bullet in the middle there, I just
Yeah.
want to, words matter on this. I'm under the impression that right now towns are not opting in. So we are proposing to switch that to have them opt out, so they by default get a tier 1, tier A.
Yeah, no, you're right. That was the way it was set up is, that's it. I'll correct that. They are not choosing to opt in.
They're choosing what we've heard already several places, that they're choosing not to, opt in to be.
And advocates are recommending we switch it to
1B.
be opt out.
You know, the numbers,
That's why I asked you about the 100, because my concern is we're not gonna get to 100.
Well, I think
But we
that's-
have them not wanting to, and I hear the biggest barrier is not wanting to take on overseeing the Act 250, the former Act 250 agreements. And
yeah, I think that's, yes, my point before is I think we're gonna have mapped about 100 eligible areas. The early stats on who is choosing to opt into the tier 1 eligibility are concerning. The stats as I've heard, you know, in like Chittenden County, about 2/3 of the tier 1B eligible communities are opting in, about 1/3 aren't. Tier 1A, that process is not, we're mid-process on that, but I am concerned here, even, you know, my old city, Burlington, last I heard, they were not gonna opt for the entire city to be tier 1A, which kind of kills me, given.
they are a poster child for 1A.
And it comes down to, as I understand, it's this enforcement question, and the ambiguity about what that means, and you know, they would have to take on, they've said to me, officials have said to me, there are hundreds of existing Act 250 permits. We need to know more about what enforcing those actually means, and I think the intent in a lot of ways is for the city regulations that have been given, if you're tier 1A eligible area, that means you have enough local regulatory capacity and laws on the books that can guide what happens going forward, but that they're saying they need that clarified. So I think the Rural Caucus bill provides a vehicle for that, and we support that. But getting back to the question of, I think that this is something we're probably going to need to keep talking about. What other reasons are municipalities not opting in? I think in addition to the complication we just talked about, I have heard some municipalities sort of make a sense that like it's a bunch of work to become a tier 1B community, and the juice is kind of maybe not worth the squeeze, given that all that means right now is that you are partially exempt from Act 250. I think if we get to the rest of our presentation here, it's possible that some of these municipalities, as they see other benefits included in what it means to be a tier 1B, that calculus might start to change. I think there are probably some communities, certainly looking around the country, let's say it this way, looking at other states around the country where you had states try to initiate pro-homes reforms. Frequent, you know, it is a common dynamic that some municipalities that don't want growth or that don't want what they consider to be the wrong type of growth in their special community, that they resist the state's efforts. Let's hope that doesn't happen. That's not what's going on in Vermont. Let's hope the sense of purpose that I think, you know, Vermont is a different place. Let's hope we can ultimately prevail on just about every municipality that they need to be part of the housing solution and that they should opt in. It may be a debate for a future day. If a significant number of municipalities don't, they don't want to be part of the housing solution. I think that might be something we have to grapple with in the future, but not this one.
So solution, yeah, so you already got, right.
Really quickly, this is the Rutland County draft map. You can see the pink areas are basically the areas that are going to be in the tier 1, are proposed to be in the tier 1 eligible communities. So you can see it's significant, but you know, once you get outside of like the main Rutland there, they're modest, they're small. But you know, it is at least the start on consensus about where we want housing growth.
And needless to say, around key corridors,
Yes,
around Route 4 West, Route 7 North, and a few other spots.
I want to make clear that
So,
Let's Go Homes continues to support Vermont's, I think, admirable public investment in affordable housing. You'll see some more detail on the platform about our continued support for increased base funding for each of these 4 programs.
thank you.
But here's, kind of turning to like, why should we do more in the housing growth areas? A lot of the justification to me comes down to this map, which is formally part of state policy, and this graph, which is baked into state policy now. This is the 2024 housing needs assessment, projecting the homes that we need over the next 5 years to address the housing shortage. My understanding is when all the numbers are in for 2025, you're going to see another year close to 2024, good year relative to, what we were doing a decade ago, and for most of the last 2 decades, but well short of what the projections are for the kind of growth we need. That's what's on the right side of the graph. And you can see that we're, even with another decent year, we're at about half of where the target says we should be.
Maybe not even.
Maybe not even,
So if our
depending
goal is
on.
7,500 a year, we're doing at the most, it's somewhere between 3 and 4.
Exactly, yeah, looks like a little more than a 3 probably again, but certainly less
Maybe
than
hovering
4.
around half,
And
but inadequate.
I think there's a real concern that despite all the work you've done in recent years, we could actually have a slowdown coming in the years ahead because of high interest rates, because of tariffs, because of construction costs. So, to me, that's a justification for continued action. Why we don't just say we've had 3 years of action. I think we should keep pulling any lever that we reasonably can to try to meet these goals. And here's specifically some levers we think you could pull, and some of them I think are squarely within this committee's jurisdiction, as I understand it, or at least something legit for you guys to care about.
We care about
I know, we have a sales tax on construction materials. There's been talk in the past about waiving that sales tax. We're suggesting we look at that again, but do it in a more focused way than has happened in the past, and maybe that can make it more palatable for some. Let's just waive this tax in the tier 1 areas, the areas that are these housing growth areas. And again, that's only about 2 where I have here, maybe 3% of the state. I see different, there's a range in what people think it's going to end up being. It's like latest I saw this morning was more like 2%. Last week I was hearing stats that were more like 3%. Whatever it is, it's small. It'd be a focused tax exemption. Other states do this. When I was a builder in other states building nonprofit affordable housing, we would get a letter for our project that we could literally take to the hardware store, show them we're not supposed to be charged sales tax. They would happily not add that to the bill.
Our nonprofits already have their.
Well, here's an interesting thing. Yes, if they are building it as a building that a nonprofit is going to own and operate, they can get tax exemptions. However, our housing nonprofits, because almost all of our programs are tax credit programs, to build new housing almost always means that the Champlain Housing Trusts and Cathedral Squares and Twin Pines, they set up single-purpose tax credit limited partnerships that are technically on paper for-profit entities, and so they do pay sales tax. They would, so affordable housing as well as market rate housing would benefit from this exemption. It would be, and the benefits wouldn't be enormous, but it's 3% at a time when we're all worried about how high construction costs are. This is 3% we could just get.
What's the estimate loss of revenue in the state?
We're
going to replace it.
Yeah.
Those are the 2 questions we have.
Yeah, I would say for both 1 and 2, there's no JFO report squarely on the way we're proposing it yet. I think it's, I would expect that 1, when it gets done, if it you know, there will be some impact, but that impact should be dwarfed by the new revenue that flows to the state from any new development actually getting built. You know, lots of new revenue from any new housing, income taxes, you know, we're not getting rid of sales taxes once people are living there and buying things. You have those consumption taxes. And so that would be the justification for it.
Okay. We'll get more to follow.
Yeah.
On your number two, I hope you had a long conversation with the governor before his budget address today.
My understanding is that the governor has a form of this in his bill that it would be removing or be raising the cap on village credits from what I heard. Is this no longer correct? I heard he was proposing raising it from 3 to 5.
That's what I heard. And
Yeah.
now I hear that. But anyway, we'll find out.
Yeah. That's news to me if it's out.
We'll find out in a few brief hours.
The next idea is a fairly big and new idea to Vermont. It's increasingly an idea that is getting traction in states around the country. Is the idea of a housing acceleration fund. This is, you know, basically to try to, you know, if you guys are interested in this, I hope you are, come back and bring an expert expert with me. But essentially the idea here would be to say that we're not just going to sit around and wait for the market to build the housing we have concerns about waiting. We're going to make some effort to use the state's financial weight to accelerate housing being built. Essentially, what other states are doing is creating kind of a mezzanine loan type product, something that replaces part of the developer's very expensive equity requirement. You know, typically banks require 20-30% of the project to be paid by the developer in the form of private equity. Given where we are in the business cycle now, that a lot of deals are requiring maybe 40%. The state could make an investment. In other states, the state is making an investment that kind of sits below the debt, is subordinate to the debt, but is superior to all the other equity. It's an investment. It gets repaid, but it gets repaid at like 5 to 7% cost of government funds as opposed to 15 to 20%.
Have you spoken with P-Check about that? Have you spoken to our treasurer about that?
We have had some.
In some ways, could very much help us brainstorm this.
Yes, yes, the treasurer's been briefed on the concept. Generally, in some ways, it has some similarity to and sort of scales up the LIAC program that he's already created. And my understanding, was not directly in the conversation. My understanding is he is interested and open to hearing more on this. And if there is interest in it, we'd like to present a lot more.
Okay, great.
The biggest, those are all important financial things. I think there is one big additional piece of regulatory work to do as well. What we've done so far in the housing growth areas is create partial or total Act 250 exemptions. We've not really done anything meaningful yet to address this broken element of our housing permitting system, which is the permit appeal system. We continue.
Yeah, so you should know that the Senate is going to begin the appeals work. It's going to begin in SNRE.
Great.
I urge you to go and testify and find out when they're taking it up.
Great.
And then it'll come back.
Great. I'm excited about that. That's the first I've definitively heard on that. We'll definitely do that. The one thing one reason that I expected there to be taking up this in some ways is this report that the Land Use Review Board has just published, which talks about ways to change the existing system, reduce the length of time of permit appeals. And we definitely have some thoughts on that, and we'll weigh in on that.
Right.
There's another route to go, and the Land Use Review Board pointed to it here in this one clause in their report, which is they noted that a lot of groups, including Let's Build Homes, but also including the NRC and others, wanted to look at, is there a way to move towards sort of a by right system for certain types of housing in these housing growth areas? And
you meet this criteria, it's by right or
exactly, and that defining those criteria, there's a ton of details to get into, and how you do that is there's a big discussion to be had, and The Land Use Review Board report does not expand on that. It says, we noted real interest in it, but that's sort of beyond the scope of our report. And
That's because in part, they pushed off their activating this work for 2 years, giving them time to address that. I would encourage us to accelerate that and the criteria. So I think we're hopefully moving in that direction.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think they kind of saw they were asked to weigh in on the existing system and take a lot, get into this long-standing debate about where appeals should go, and I think that's where they put the bulk of their time in their report. But they signaled that this was an important conversation. There are others who I think in some ways the governor's 802 homes program is an effort to create some form of by right housing with these sort of pre-approved prototypes.
Yeah.
There are some other ideas circulating out there about sort of new mandates the state can make. And I think all of that should be explored, and we'll weigh in on all of that. I have a concern about those conversations though, and that I feel like we maybe have seen this movie before of attempts to mandate from the state level. You may all be familiar with the attempts to legalize ADUs that go all the way back to the 1990s.
This committee started them.
Great. And my sense of that history is the initial attempts where the state just said ADUs should be legal.
It took us a while to get to the by right part.
If you don't get into the DNA of the local zoning, there are all sorts of things that can continue to be an obstacle, even if at some level you're supposed to have a right to do this. You can still, and I think as it has been proposed with the 802 homes, parking regulations would still be enforced, setback requirements from the side and rear yards, lot coverage. So we've been advancing an idea that tries to sort of comprehensively deal with all that, and it's called root zones. I know we're running out of time, so very quickly, again, this is something I'd love to come back and talk to you and other committees in more detail about. You do have a concept paper in your materials. Basically, at a high level, the way this would work is the state would create a model Vermont code. The key characteristic of this code is that it would only have clear and objective standards. That's a big change from the way we tended to do zoning in this country in the past, and it's the subjective standards that give DRBs the ability to make subjective decisions. That's the driver of our appeal. That's what gets appealed. That's what gets these undue adverse impact tests about traffic circulation, these undue adverse impact tests about parking impacts. That is whether you should get a waiver of a subjective waiver of a parking requirement. That's where the appeals happen. And so this wouldn't have any of that. It would sure bring all the planning up front, have only clear and objective standards in the code. Municipalities would then have the option of adopting this and sort of tailoring it to their location. If there are some benefits or powers the state is granting to these new root zones, residential opportunity overlay towns, the state would have some sort of approval process. And then once this is in place, here's sort of the magic of it from my perspective is a builder project comes forward, goes to the zoning administrator, asks for a permit, and it's a straightforward process of sort of going down a checklist. Do you meet the rules? If you do, it's not a new subjective governmental decision that can be appealed. It is a certification that you have met all the criteria, and there's nothing to appeal.
And you're pre-lit.
It has the potential to dramatically reduce permit appeals. It still preserves local planning, local democracy, but that happens upfront, not on a project by project basis. I think, and we're testing this, we're starting to work with some rural communities. This has the potential to address one of the issues we were talking about previously, that about more than half of our communities will not have tier 1 eligible areas. They won't have any expedited housing as a result of Act 181. This could become the path to more communities being able to get those benefits, and we're testing that by working with rural communities. And there's a lot of
this
interest.
concept of front-loading planning and permitting so that you're then ready to roll is not new to this committee, it's just that this is great, this is great.
Well, I would say that's your reaction, yeah.
So related to Act 181, you mentioned a rural caucus bill.
Yes.
Is there actually a bill that's that we have to, or is this just a concept?
I've seen the legislation, it's an actual bill, is my understanding.
It's in the house. We'll get a copy of it. I don't know if it's been introduced yet. It's on its way.
Thank you.
You have an omnibus housing bill that we could bring in some of those
But I
conversations.
think it went to SNR. We're gonna have elements of it in this committee.
Did it go there? It's supposed to come out tomorrow. I wasn't sure.
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure.
I've actually said I'm looking for it.
Yes, it should be out tomorrow.
We'll
The
see.
rural
Wow.
caucus bill?
No, the rural caucus bill is being introduced in the House, and I will.
I think mine most closely aligns with the chamber. A lot of cleanup of Home Act 181, and CHIP. CHIP needs some cleanup as well, so I don't know
Is
if
that
you
what
all
we're
addressed
referring
that
to?
already.
We talked about it a little bit, we didn't
Okay.
get into the details. but-
And Chip would name, yeah, anyway. More follow you, 2 minutes.
That's kind of the end of my staff presentation, so if
Great.
you,
Thank you.
Great.
This is terrific. Committee questions?
Any thoughts on Vita's request to expand their scope of lending authority to also support more market rate housing projects?
I was aware that was discussion that was going on, I haven't seen the formal proposal yet, I don't think I'm ready to weigh in on it yet.
Right.
But I appreciate that there's, yeah, I appreciate this discussion and that,
Yes, because I know you
Yeah.
understand how that
Yeah.
process works.
Any other questions for? Thank you.
Great,
You're
thank
just
you.
beginning, as you know. Thank you very much for being here at the beginning. Thank you for helping so fully, and it's very exciting to have you as additional partners. This is great.
Awesome. Well, it was exciting to be with you and look forward to doing it again.
Thank you very much. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Are you Mr. Brady?